I used to think family meant unconditional love, that no matter how bad things got, we'd always have each other. But I was wrong. Because the day I stopped paying my parents' bills was the day they decided I was no longer their daughter. It didn't happen overnight. It started with silence, the kind that feels heavy, like something inside you knows a storm is coming. My calls went unanswered, my messages left on read. Then came the text that ended everything. If you can't support us anymore, don't bother calling yourself our daughter. I stared at those words for a long time, my hands trembling. My own parents! The same people who'd raised me, who used to say I was their pride, their reason to smile, now cutting me off because I finally said no? It wasn't like I hadn't helped before. For years, I'd been the one paying for everything, the electricity, the rent, even their medical bills. Every time they said they were short on cash, I'd send more. Every time I thought we were finally stable, another expense would appear out of nowhere. And because I loved them, I kept saying yes. But love has limits, especially when it starts to cost you your peace. The last straw came one night when my bank app showed my account nearly empty. I'd been juggling bills for 3 households, theirs, mine, and my younger brother's college tuition. I was exhausted, working 2 jobs just to stay afloat, and still it was never enough. There was always another reason, another emergency, another guilt trip. When I told my parents I couldn't keep doing it, the disappointment in their voices cut deeper than any insult could. My mother's tone turned cold, the warmth I grew up with replaced by quiet resentment. My father didn't say much, but his silence said everything. To them, my love had always been measured in money. And now that the money had run out, so had the love. That night, I sat alone on my apartment floor, surrounded by unpaid bills and empty coffee cups, wondering how everything had fallen apart. I had done everything right. Worked hard, sacrificed, tried to be the good daughter. But somehow, I had become the villain in my own family story. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the moment I chose to stop paying, would change everything. Not just my relationship with them, but how I saw myself. Because sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stop trying to earn love that was supposed to be free. Before things fell apart, we were the picture of a close family, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. People used to say how lucky I was to have such caring parents, how nice it must be to come from a family that always had each other's back. I used to smile and agree, even though deep down, I knew what they really meant was I always had their back. Ever since I got my first job, it was like an unspoken agreement that I'd help out. My dad's business had gone under years ago, and my mom hadn't worked since I was in high school. I was 22 when I paid my first family bill, the electricity. "Just this once," my mom said on the phone, her voice soft, sweet. "We'll pay you back when things get better." But things never got better. Month after month, year after year, there was always something new. A medical emergency, a broken car, a rent increase. My paychecks became their safety net, my savings their backup plan. And I kept telling myself it was fine, that this was what good daughters did, that one day it would all balance out. But it never did. The more I gave, the more they expected. My mother became used to sending me shopping lists instead of asking if I could afford it. My father started calling less to check on me and more to discuss money. Even my younger brother, still in college, would message me things like, "Mom said you'd handle my tuition this semester, right?" At first, I laughed it off. I told myself they were just struggling, that families help each other. But over time, it stopped feeling like help and started feeling like debt, one that only grew heavier. What hurt the most was the way they made me feel guilty for wanting to keep anything for myself. When I mentioned saving up for a car, my mom sighed and said, "Must be nice to think about luxuries when your family's struggling." When I hesitated to send money one month, my dad reminded me, "If it weren't for us, you wouldn't even have a life worth living." I started to realize that their love came with conditions, invisible strings tied to every dollar I sent, every favor I did. And each time I gave in, I lost another piece of myself. Still, I couldn't bring myself to say no. Every time I thought about setting boundaries, I saw their faces, heard the disappointment in their voices, and folded, because saying no to them felt like betrayal. My friends never really understood. You have to stop letting them take advantage of you, one of them told me. But how do you call it taking advantage when it's your own parents? When you've been raised to believe that their happiness depends on your sacrifice? It took me years to admit that our family dynamic wasn't love. It was control disguised as care. And by the time I realized it, I was already buried too deep to dig myself out easily. Still, a part of me hoped they'd change, that one day they'd say, "You've done enough. It's time for you to rest." But that day never came. Instead, they just learned new ways to ask, new ways to make me feel guilty, new ways to remind me that I owed them. And I kept paying, not just with money, but with time, energy, and pieces of my self-worth. Until the day I finally said the word that changed everything. No. It happened on a Friday, payday, the kind of day that used to bring a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I could finally breathe for a moment, and dread because I knew what came next. The phone call. Sure enough, at 6:47 p.m., my mother called. Her voice was sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something. "Hi, sweetheart," she began. "How was work?" I already knew where this was going. The small talk, the laughter, the sigh. It was all part of the routine. "I was wondering if you could help us out this month," she said finally. "The utility bill came, and it's higher than we expected. Your dad's still waiting on that payment from the insurance company. You know how it is." I felt my stomach tighten. I had rent due in 3 days, groceries to buy, and my own bills stacking up on the counter. I took a breath and said the word I'd been too scared to say for years. "Mom, I can't." There was a pause, short, sharp, heavy. "What do you mean, you can't?" she asked, her tone shifting instantly. "I just can't right now. I'm barely keeping up with my own expenses. I need to catch up before I can help anyone else." Her voice hardened. "So after everything we've done for you, you're just going to turn your back on us?" "Mom, that's not what I'm saying. Your father worked himself sick for you. I gave up my own dreams so you could have yours. And now you're saying you can't even help us with a simple bill?" Her words hit like bullets. I closed my eyes, holding back tears. "I've been helping for years, but I can't keep doing this. I'm drowning." The silence that followed was worse than yelling. Then a sharp laugh. "You think you're drowning? Try living with no income. Try paying medical bills with nothing. We raised you better than this, but I guess money changed you." That line broke something inside me, because it wasn't money that had changed. It was them. Or maybe it was me finally seeing things for what they were. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to. Her or the version of myself that still wanted to make her proud. "I just can't do it anymore." She didn't respond right away. I heard her breathing, short and sharp, before she said the words that would echo in my head for weeks. "If that's how you feel, maybe you're not our daughter anymore." Then the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, phone still in my hand, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. My apartment felt colder than usual. Emptier, too. For the first time, I realized how alone I really was. The next few days were a blur. No calls, no messages, not even from my brother. When I tried reaching out, no one answered. I even called my father's number, but it went straight to voicemail. The silence was deafening. At work, I smiled like everything was fine, but inside I was breaking apart. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was them. Every time it wasn't, I felt the weight of their absence a little more. It's strange how quickly love can turn into punishment, how the people who raised you can make you feel like a stranger for setting boundaries. But even through the pain, something inside me knew this was necessary, that this was what freedom really looked like. Messy, heartbreaking, and terrifying. The breaking point wasn't just about the bills. It was about years of being treated like a safety net instead of a daughter. Years of trying to prove my worth through sacrifice. Years of mistaking control for love. And though I didn't know it then, that single no was the start of everything. The beginning of losing them, yes, but also the beginning of finding myself. The silence that followed that call stretched for days, then weeks. Every morning, I'd wake up and instinctively reach for my phone, expecting a message from my mom, a guilt trip, a voice note, anything. But there was nothing. It was as if I'd vanished from their world overnight. At first, I tried to convince myself they just needed time to cool off, that after a few days, they'd come around and things would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew that normal was gone. I'd broken the unspoken rule, the one that said my role in the family was to give, no matter the cost. Then one day, I logged into my online banking app to transfer money for my rent and froze. There were multiple withdrawals I hadn't made. My parents still had access to one of my older accounts, the one I'd opened years ago when we used it for family emergencies. I'd forgotten to close it. They hadn't. Thousands were gone. I called my mother immediately. "Mom, did you use my account?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't even hesitate. "We needed it," she said, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "Your father's car broke down. We'll pay you back." "Mom, that was my rent money," I shouted, unable to hold back anymore. She sighed, irritated. "You're overreacting. You always have more. Don't make a big deal out of this." My chest burned. "You cut me off for saying no, and now you're stealing from me? Do you even hear yourself?" Her tone turned icy. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. We're your parents. Everything you have, we gave you." That was it. The sentence that shattered any illusion I had left. I realized then that they didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a resource, a walking wallet. The moment I stopped serving that role, I stopped being a daughter. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were trembling as I called the bank to freeze the account. The representative asked if I wanted to report it as theft. I didn't know how to answer. How do you tell a stranger your own parents stole from you? That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because of the money, though losing it hurt, but because I finally had to face the truth that my love had become transactional to them. I wasn't their child. I was their provider. A few days later, my brother texted. "Mom says you accused them of stealing. That's messed up." I tried explaining, sending screenshots, but he didn't want to hear it. "You've changed," he wrote. "You used to care about us." It was like losing my whole family twice. First when they disowned me, and again when they turned me into the villain. The loneliness was unbearable. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake, if maybe I should have kept paying just to keep the peace. But then I'd remember the exhaustion, the constant anxiety, the feeling of never being enough, and I knew I couldn't go back. Weeks turned into months. I focused on rebuilding my finances, closing old accounts, changing passwords. I went to therapy and started unpacking the years of guilt that had kept me chained. My therapist said something that stayed with me. When love requires you to suffer, it's not love, it's control. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I learned to enjoy quiet mornings without the sound of my phone buzzing for help. I took long walks, cooked for myself, and started saving not for emergencies that weren't mine, but for dreams I had abandoned. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw a family photo my brother had posted. My parents, smiling at a dinner table, laughing like nothing had ever happened. For a moment, my chest tightened. But then I realized they looked happy. And strangely, so did I. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding them together. I wasn't their fixer. I wasn't their bank. I was just me, learning to live without the weight of their expectation. The fallout wasn't clean. It left scars. But those scars became proof of growth, reminders that love shouldn't come with a receipt. A few months after cutting ties, I thought I'd finally found peace, until one afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from the bank. At first, I assumed it was just a statement, but as I unfolded the paper, my breath caught. There were transactions listed under my name, large ones, to accounts I didn't recognize. Panic set in. I called the bank immediately, explaining that I hadn't made those transfers. After a few tense minutes on hold, the representative came back with something that made my stomach drop. These transfers were made using joint authorization from your parents. Your signature was on the file. My voice cracked. That account was supposed to be closed months ago. I removed them. He hesitated. It seems the closure request wasn't finalized. They still had access. I hung up, my hands trembling. I couldn't believe it. Even after everything, even after I'd drawn the line, they had still found a way to take from me. My heart pounded with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the betrayal, the deliberate choice to ignore every boundary I'd set. That night, I called my father. For the first time in years, there was no fear in my voice, only exhaustion. "Why would you do this?" I asked quietly. He sighed, that same heavy, dismissive sound I'd grown up with. "We didn't think you'd notice. We needed it for the house. You know how hard things have been." I could barely speak. "You knew what this would do to me. You knew I was trying to rebuild." "Stop being dramatic. You've always had more than enough." It was like hearing an echo of my mother's voice. I realized then that they didn't see what they were doing as wrong, because to them, my money still belonged to them. My success was still theirs to spend. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret and called my lawyer friend, Ellen, who had helped me once before. Within a week, she gathered every bank statement, every transfer, every document with my forged signature. When she laid them on the table, the truth hit like a punch. Over the last 6 months, my parents had drained nearly $30,000 from my old account. Ellen looked at me gently. "You can file a report. It's theft." The word theft felt like a knife. These were my parents, the people who once tucked me into bed and told me they loved me. The idea of reporting them to the police made me physically ill. But what choice did I have? How many times could I let them take from me before there was nothing left? That night, I sat on my couch, staring at the police report form on my laptop. Every part of me screamed not to do it. It felt wrong, cruel even. But then I thought about the years I'd spent working myself to the bone for their comfort. The guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, the way they'd twisted love into obligation. And something inside me shifted. For the first time, I chose me. I submitted the report. It was short, factual, emotionless, just dates, amounts, and signatures. But to me, it felt like closing a door I'd been too afraid to shut. The next day, I received a call from the police department confirming the case was under review. My heart pounded, but beneath the fear, there was a strange calm, a sense of taking back what was mine, not just in money, but in dignity. When word reached my parents, the backlash was instant. My phone lit up with messages, my mother's voice trembling through a voicemail. "How could you do this to us?" My father texted once, "You'll regret this." But for the first time, their words didn't break me. They just bounced off the walls of a life I'd finally taken control of. The discovery wasn't just about missing money. It was about seeing my family for who they really were. And though it shattered the illusion of love I'd been clinging to, it also gave me something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The day after the police got involved, everything shifted. My parents called nonstop. My brother reached out, begging me to drop the report. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly appeared in my messages, calling me ungrateful, heartless, accusing me of humiliating my own blood. It felt like the entire family had turned into a courtroom, and I was on trial. For a while, I almost gave in. The guilt was heavy, familiar, like a chain I'd worn my entire life. My mother's tearful voicemails echoed in my mind. "We gave you everything. You wouldn't even have your job, your education without us." Maybe she was right, I thought. Maybe I did owe them. But then Ellen said something that stopped me cold. "You don't owe them your life because they gave you birth. You've already repaid them 1,000 times over. What they're doing isn't love. It's control." Her words hit hard. I realized I had spent years confusing guilt for love and obligation for respect. I had allowed my parents to cross lines because I was too scared of losing them, but in truth, I'd already lost them. The version of them I loved no longer existed. All that was left were people who only knew how to take. A week later, the police concluded the investigation. The officer told me they had confronted my parents. They denied forging my signature, but admitted they had used the money. The case could go to court, but something inside me didn't want that anymore. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. So I made one final decision. I withdrew the case, but I had the bank permanently close every shared account and block all access. I moved to a different city, changed my number, and left everything behind. For the first time, I didn't look back. It wasn't easy. The silence that followed was strange, sometimes comforting, sometimes crushing. There were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable. I'd think about my parents and wonder if they missed me, or if they still saw me as nothing more than a lost wallet. But every time I started doubting myself, I remembered what Ellen had said, that real love doesn't demand your destruction. Slowly, I began rebuilding my life, this time with boundaries. I started therapy, reconnected with old friends, and learned how to say no without feeling like I was breaking something sacred. Months later, I received a letter from my mother. It was short, handwritten, and shaky. She said she didn't understand why I'd done what I did, but she hoped I was happy. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what they had done, just a quiet, uncertain attempt at connection. I read it twice, then placed it in a drawer. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe not. What I do know is this. I am no longer the daughter who buys love. I am no longer the provider who sacrifices herself to earn acceptance. I am simply me. Flawed, healing, but finally free. And if being free means being alone for a while, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. People always tell you that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that no matter what happens, you should never turn your back on the people who raised you. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes those same people can be the ones who drain you until there's nothing left. When I finally stepped away, I learned something powerful. That walking away doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you started loving yourself, too. And that kind of love is the hardest, but most important kind of all. There are days I still miss them. The laughter, the smell of my mother's cooking, my father's quiet humming in the mornings. But I've come to accept that missing someone doesn't mean you should go back to what broke you. Some people you love from afar. Some relationships you honor by letting them end. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt guilty for choosing yourself, I want you to know you're not selfish. You're surviving. You're reclaiming your worth. You're learning that love built on money, fear, or obligation isn't love at all. It's dependence disguised as affection. For the longest time, I believed being the good daughter meant giving until I had nothing left. But now I know the truth. Being good doesn't mean being used. Real love doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't silence your pain or demand your sacrifice. It helps you grow. So if you're standing where I once stood, torn between guilt and freedom, choose freedom. It might hurt at first. You might cry, you might doubt yourself, you might even want to go back. But one day, you'll wake up and realize the air feels lighter, your heart feels stronger, and you'll finally understand you were never the problem. You just stopped being the solution to everyone else's chaos. I used to think losing my family was the worst thing that could happen to me, but it wasn't. The worst thing would have been losing myself trying to keep them happy. And now that I've found myself again, I'm never letting go.